In the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte controlled much of Europe. He had reshaped the continent through military conquest, political reform, and sheer ambition. But what if his ambitions had extended across the Atlantic? What if Napoleon had attempted to invade the United States? Could the young nation have survived the French Empire? Napoleon's first challenge would have been the Atlantic Ocean. At this time, Britain controlled the seas with a dominant navy. Any attempt to transport tens of thousands of troops across the ocean would have been extremely risky. If the French fleet were intercepted, the invasion could have failed before a single soldier reached American soil. Historical precedent shows us how critical naval superiority was. Napoleon himself lost opportunities in Europe due to insufficient control of the seas. Suppose, however, that Napoleon managed to land his army successfully. The most likely point of entry would have been the Louisiana Territory, which France had recently sold to the United States in 1803 during the Louisiana Purchase. This region was vast, sparsely populated, and largely unexplored. It offered space to maneuver, but also serious logistical challenges. French troops, highly trained and disciplined, could initially advance quickly, but the lack of established roads, bridges, and towns would make resupply extremely difficult. Local militias and Native American groups would present another major obstacle. Guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and knowledge of the terrain could harass French supply lines and isolate units. This is a pattern seen repeatedly in military history. Even the most disciplined armies struggle when facing irregular forces in unfamiliar territory. Napoleon's experience in Europe would not automatically translate to success in North America. The terrain itself would be a formidable opponent. Rivers like the Mississippi and Ohio, dense forests, and swampy areas would slow troop movements. Winters in the northern regions would expose soldiers to cold, disease, and food shortages. Napoleon's campaigns in Russia decades later demonstrated how even a powerful, well-equipped army can falter in extreme conditions. In North America, similar factors would challenge the French army long before it reached the eastern cities. If Napoleon decided to advance toward the Atlantic coast, he would encounter fortified cities and strategic positions. Cities like New Orleans, Philadelphia, and New York, though smaller than European capitals, were defended by local militias and the emerging United States Army. Dividing forces to capture multiple targets would weaken French units and leave supply lines exposed to attacks. Every mile eastward would become increasingly costly. American naval forces, although small, could disrupt French reinforcements. Privateers and the U.S. Navy could intercept supply ships, preventing the French from maintaining a sustained campaign. Britain, always attentive to the balance of power, might intervene. The Royal Navy could assist American forces, blockade French ports, or attack French supply lines. Napoleon's failure to control the seas would severely limit his operational capabilities, just as it did historically in Europe. Political factors would also complicate the invasion. States in the U.S. had varying degrees of loyalty and capability. Some regions might resist fiercely, while others could attempt negotiations. The complexity of uniting a young nation against a foreign invader would test the political and military organization of the United States. Internationally, European powers hostile to Napoleon would see the invasion as an opportunity to weaken France's influence. Any diversion of troops to North America could undermine Napoleon's dominance in Europe, creating additional strategic problems. Even if Napoleon captured territory, controlling it would be another matter. Communication and supply lines would be stretched across thousands of miles. Guerrilla attacks from militias and native groups would continue, and the French would face constant attrition from disease and logistical failure. Historical campaigns, such as Napoleon's invasion of Russia, demonstrate the limits of military power in hostile territory. Geography, climate, and local resistance often matter more than battlefield tactics alone. In this scenario, the best-case outcome for Napoleon might be temporary territorial gains in the south or along major rivers, yet holding the country against persistent resistance and potential British intervention would likely prove impossible. Over time, the combination of American resilience, geographical challenges, and international pressure would force a withdrawal. Napoleon could win battles, but ultimately lose the war. This thought experiment highlights several key principles of military history: the importance of logistics, the impact of terrain, and the value of local knowledge. Even the most brilliant generals are limited by these factors. The United States, while young and inexperienced, benefited from geography, a motivated population, and the ability to draw support from allies. These advantages would likely have allowed the nation to survive a French invasion. In conclusion, while the idea of Napoleon invading America is dramatic, it is highly unlikely that the French emperor could have conquered the United States. His army could have caused disruption, captured some territory, and challenged the young nation. But ultimately, logistics, geography, local resistance, and international politics would have made sustained occupation impossible. The United States would have endured, perhaps facing greater challenges, but continuing its path toward growth and independence. This scenario reminds us that even the most powerful empires are constrained by factors beyond battlefield strategy. Logistics, terrain, and the determination of local populations often dictate the outcome of wars more than the brilliance of a general. Napoleon invading America would have been a formidable challenge, but history suggests that the young United States would likely survive, shaping the world in ways Napoleon could never control.